we've put together some special segments for you. Sprinkled here and there in the middle of the regular Sowing Seed podcasts, we're planting episodes we're calling Growing the Seed. Here, we'll be documenting the steps we take along the Sowing Seed journey as we build a business and build a brand. You'll see it all, when it works and when it's a little messy. So, right here, right now for you, here's Growing the Seed with your host, Matt Miller.
Several weeks back, I shared a little bit of my thoughts about actually hosting a podcast and having your own show, and some of the ways that people are utilizing that to grow an existing business or to turn it into a business itself. I wanted to talk today briefly about the power of podcast guest interviews for your business. See, I hired a coach, a guy by the name of Aaron Walker, here about 4 years ago. And after Aaron and I had spent some time getting to know one another and that type of thing, one of the things that, and this was actually about 3 years ago, actually, he encouraged me to do was to start reaching out to existing podcasts and start sharing or offering to be a guest and to share my story on those shows. Well, at the time, the only podcast I had ever listened to was called the Coopcast. It was a couple, I don't even remember where they're out of, that was raising chickens and living out on the farm, and their entire show was about the farm and their day-to-day there. So when Aaron started encouraging me to begin to reach out and be a guest and start utilizing those interviews as a means of promoting my company, School Spirit Vending, I had no idea what I was doing. But I decided to follow his lead because as a coach, the guy has lots of insights and wisdom and knowledge that I just didn't have. Well, for the first 6 months or so, I did exactly what he said. I probably did 25 or 30 interviews, and I would just email different podcasters and share briefly with them who I was and what my story was and ask if they were looking for guests. And slowly but surely, people started saying, yes, we'd love to have you on the show. Well, after about 6 months' time, I had very little to show for that, except for I had gotten some experience and I'd gotten fairly good at beginning to tell my story in an interview format. Well, one weekday, I was talking to a good friend of mine and Aaron's by the name of Tom Schwab. And Tom is an online expert. He's got a company, or at least had one, called Inbound for e-commerce, I believe, if I remember right. Basically, Tom was sharing one day about how having a personal landing page and some sort of content that folks would have interest in that they could download is a great way to start to grow an email list and to more effectively market to people who might potentially have interest after hearing me on a show. Because in those first 6 months, I only had people reach out to me 2 or 3 times. And that was a lot of work for just a couple of folks reaching out. By the way, none of them ended up turning up to be anything in relation to our business. So under Tom's guidance, he launched a course. I was the initial beta tester of that course. And as I went through it, he and I did some mini coaching calls for 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And he helped me come up with a short ebook or what they might call a lead magnet. And then he also taught me about landing pages and the importance of having them, the importance of having a different one for each and every show I'm on. I'll never forget, I was at Podcast Movement a few years ago in Fort Worth, and J.V. Crum of the Conscious Millionaire podcast was there, and we got to talking, and he heard a little bit of my story and said, man, I'd love to have you on the show. And so within a day or so, I was scheduled to be on his show. Well, I was told that JV expects his guests to have some sort of free download for the audience. And that show that I scheduled 3 weeks from that day, at the time without a landing page, at the time without any kind of ebook or anything, was the impetus I needed to actually get it all done. Well, that show was now a little bit over 3 years ago since I was on it. I have now done hundreds of interviews since that time. We have had thousands of people reach out wanting to learn more about our franchise, School Spirit Vending, and information of which can be found at ssvbusiness.com. And we have literally marketed and grown our franchise from 40 families around the country to now 110 in the last 2.5 years, utilizing podcast interviews to do it. Leveraging the audience of podcastors who have shows, who interview guests, who have taken time to build that audience, providing value to that audience through my story and through thought process and knowledge and wisdom that I've gained along the way. And then also having an opportunity to share a little bit about what we do with SSV. It has been a huge, huge blessing for us. And we would not be where we are today without doing those interviews. Now, I don't reach out to many podcasters myself anymore. Tom, a couple of years ago, launched a new company, of which I was one of the first beta testers of it as well, called Interview Valet. And what Interview Valet does is they book guests on podcasts. And so I pay them a monthly fee, kind of like a PR agency of sorts. And they link me with shows where I would be a good fit and my message would be a good fit for their audiences. They schedule the interview, etc. I literally just have to show up and do the interview at the scheduled time. And in the process, I'm able to continue to do interviews on a weekly basis, continue to grow my reach, continue to provide more and more value to people all over the world, literally on those shows, and promote my company, School Spirit Vending, and our franchise in the process. Powerful, powerful, powerful tool. Some words of advice, though. As in anything, this is a process. This is a marathon, not a sprint. I've done probably 350 interviews now to have the success that we've had. And I've gone to countless conferences to develop relationships with some of the top podcasters in the industry in hopes of potentially having an opportunity at some point to share with their audience as well. Guys like Pat Flynn, guys like John Lee Dumas, podcasters like Jamie Tardy, an eventual millionaire. Of course, J.V. Crum and his Conscious Millionaire show, Nick Loper and Side Hustle Nation. The list goes on and on. But that has been our marketing focus. That has been our marketing tool. And what's really, really cool about it is that people get a chance to hear my heart. They get a chance to hear our story, our real story, not a hyped version like so much marketing is out there today, and decide for themselves. And if for some reason what we're doing doesn't make any sense to them, we don't ever hear from them. But if it does, they already have a really good idea about who we are, what we do. And by the time we talk, they at least have interest in the concept of school spirit vending and providing hassle-free fundraising for schools and creating a passive income stream with our school spirit vending program. If you want to get a feel for some of the interviews I've done, you can go to ssvbusiness.com. There's a tab across the top of the page. I think it's top podcasts, and there's probably 10 or 12 shows that I've been on just to give you a feel. And if for some reason the franchise makes sense to you, would love to hear from you. Can't guarantee there's territory in your area, but you never know. Maybe we'll do some business together. Hope this helps, guys. God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Sowing Seed Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review in iTunes or your podcast player of choice. So until next time, go plant the seed you need to succeed.